The wreckage of Darian's ship sizzled in the cold, acidic rain. Smoke curled into the dark sky, swallowed by the thick, churning clouds that never seemed to part. His breathing was shallow inside his cracked helmet, his suit flashing warning signals, oxygen levels dropping. The emergency systems had barely saved him during the crash, but now, stranded on an unknown planet, survival was a battle he wasn't sure he could win. His fingers tightened around the pulse rifle strapped to his chest as he scanned the landscape. The planet was wrong. Jagged black mountains cut into the horizon, twisted trees with blood-red leaves stretched toward the sky, and the ground beneath his boots felt alive. It pulsed, as if something massive slumbered beneath. A guttural screech echoed through the canyons. Darian stiffened. He turned just in time to see something shift in the shadows, a creature, lurking. He didn't wait to see what it was. His training kicked in. He moved. Finding shelter was his first priority. The second was fixing his ship, but with most of it scattered across miles of dangerous terrain, that was a long shot. His visor flickered, detecting movement ahead. He ducked behind a rock, steadying his breathing. Through the haze, a structure appeared. An old facility, metal walls rusted, the roof half collapsed. It looked abandoned, but something inside him whispered, "You're not alone." He stepped inside cautiously. The air was thick with the scent of decay. The walls were smeared with symbols, alien writing. Some he recognized from old records, others were completely unfamiliar. Then he heard it, a soft, broken breath. Darian turned, rifle raised. In the corner, barely visible through the dim light, was a figure. A girl. Alien, but unmistakably humanoid. Her skin was an iridescent blue, marred with scars and bruises. Long, tangled silver hair covered part of her face, and her wrists were chained to the wall, metal restraints cutting deep into her skin. She was dying. And yet, her eyes opened. And when they met his, a shiver ran down his spine. Not because she looked dangerous, but because she looked at him as if she had been waiting for him. "Who are you?" Darian whispered. Her lips barely moved, but he heard her. "Elyra." Her voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. His fingers hovered over the lock on her chains. He hesitated. There was no telling who she was or why she was here, but leaving her wasn't an option. He pulled a tool from his belt, hacking at the restraints. Sparks flew. The metal groaned before finally snapping apart. Elyra collapsed forward, but Darian caught her. She was freezing, her body trembling with exhaustion and pain. "We need to go," he said. Her fingers clutched at his suit. "No, they're coming." A sound rumbled through the ground. Not thunder, not the wind. Something far worse. Darian turned, raising his weapon as the shadows outside twisted. And then, the monsters arrived. Darian braced himself, his grip tightening on his rifle. The creatures slithered and crawled through the shattered walls of the facility, their grotesque bodies shifting in unnatural ways. They had too many limbs, too many eyes, black, soulless orbs that locked onto him and Elyra. The largest one stepped forward, its skin pulsing like a sack filled with writhing worms. A low, guttural growl vibrated through the air, sending shivers down Darian's spine. Elyra weakly clutched his arm. "Run." But Darian had never been the running type. The beast lunged. Darian fired. A blast of searing plasma struck the creature's chest, but instead of falling, it screeched in agony and split open, birthing smaller monstrosities from within. "Shit," Darian cursed, grabbing Elyra and pulling her to her feet. "We need to move. Now." She was barely conscious, her body frail and weak, but as they stumbled forward, the chains that had bound her clattered against the floor, echoing through the ruined facility. The creatures recoiled at the sound, hissing, their bodies twisting as if in pain. Darian noticed. "The chains," he said. "They don't like them." Elyra's breath was shallow. "They were made to contain them." Darian didn't have time to ask more. He scooped up one of the broken shackles and hurled it at the nearest creature. The moment the metal touched its flesh, the beast recoiled violently, its body sizzling as if burned by acid. "That's convenient," he muttered, grabbing more pieces of the shattered restraints. "Come on. I know a way out." The creatures snarled but hesitated, unwilling to cross the rusted chains scattered on the floor. Darian took the chance and dragged Elyra toward a collapsed section of the wall, where moonlight spilled through the wreckage. Behind them, the beasts shrieked in frustration, but they did not follow. The moment they stepped outside, the air grew heavier, the scent of rain and burnt metal thick in the atmosphere. Darian glanced at Elyra. "Who left you here?" Her eyes flickered open, filled with something unreadable. "My own people." Darian had seen many things in his time as an explorer. He had met creatures that defied logic, seen worlds that could steal a man's sanity. But he had never seen an alien look so human, so betrayed. "Why?" he asked. Elyra swayed but steadied herself against him. "Because I wasn't supposed to exist." Her words sent a chill through him. But before he could ask more, the sky rumbled, and a deafening roar split the air. Darian looked up. A ship, massive, sleek, and unlike anything he had ever seen. And it was descending fast. Elyra gripped his wrist. "They found me." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with something far worse. Resignation. Darian didn't hesitate. If the ship belonged to Elyra's people, the ones who had abandoned her, then waiting around wasn't an option. "Move," he ordered, looping an arm around her waist to support her weight. She was struggling to keep up, her steps unsteady, but the fear in her eyes kept her going. The roar of the descending ship grew louder, winds kicking up dust and debris around them. Darian's mind raced. His ship was wrecked, his supplies were limited, and now he was playing protector to an alien girl who was apparently being hunted by her own kind. Just another day in deep space. They stumbled into a twisted forest, the crimson leaves whispering like voices as they passed. The ground beneath them pulsed again, faint but undeniable. Darian had noticed it earlier, but now he was certain. Something beneath this planet was alive. Elyra suddenly grabbed his wrist, stopping him. "No use running," she said, her voice hoarse. "They'll find us." Darian exhaled sharply. "Then what do you suggest? Surrender?" She shook her head. "We go underground." Darian frowned. "Underground?" Elyra turned her gaze toward a massive crevice in the earth, a jagged tear that descended into darkness. The facility above was only part of the research site. Below is where they hid their greatest secret. Darian stared at her. "And you know this how?" She hesitated. Then, "Because I was made there." Something cold curled around Darian's spine, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he tightened his grip on his rifle. "All right, down we go." The ship above was nearly overhead, its searchlights cutting through the night. Without another word, Darian grabbed Elyra's hand, and they plunged into the crevice. The descent was brutal. They slid down the jagged slope, loose rocks crumbling beneath them. Elyra's breath was ragged, but she kept moving. Darian's boots hit solid ground first, and he caught her before she collapsed. They had entered a tunnel. The walls were smooth metal, too artificial to be part of the natural rock formations. Faint blue lights flickered along the floor, leading deeper into the unknown. Darian steadied Elyra. "This is no ordinary cave." She looked up at him, her silver hair falling over her face. "No, it's a vault." The words barely left her lips before the entire tunnel trembled, a deep rumble shaking the walls. Darian turned, pulse rifle raised. What was that? Elyra's expression was unreadable. "The reason they abandoned this place." Another tremor. The lights flickered, and then the tunnel came alive. Panels in the walls hissed open, revealing massive, grotesque figures in stasis chambers. Some looked like the creatures from the facility above. Others were worse, much worse. Darian's blood ran cold. "What the hell is this place?" Elyra touched one of the glass chambers, her fingers trembling. "A prison." Darian was about to respond when a voice echoed through the chamber. "Subject 0 detected." The air grew heavy. Elyra's eyes widened in horror. "No," she whispered. The voice spoke again, releasing containment locks. Every single chamber hissed open, and the monsters woke up. Darian barely had time to react before the first creature stirred. Its eyes snapped open, milky white, unfocused, but filled with an unnatural hunger. Then the others followed. Rows upon rows of monstrous beings blinked to life, their limbs twitching, their bodies shifting unnaturally as they pulled themselves free from their stasis pods. Some had elongated skulls and serrated teeth. Others were hunched masses of muscle and exposed bone. And all of them were looking at Darian and Elyra. "Run," Elyra whispered. Darian didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed her hand and bolted. The tunnel stretched ahead, but the creatures were faster. Snarls and screeches filled the air as they clawed their way free, their grotesque forms moving with horrifying speed. Darian fired over his shoulder, blue plasma lighting up the dark as it struck one of the beasts. The thing screeched and staggered, but it didn't fall. Elyra was gasping, her body weak, but she kept moving. "We have to go deeper." Darian clenched his jaw. The deeper they went, the less chance they had of escaping. But there was no choice. They burst into a massive chamber, the ceiling stretching high above them, filled with cables and forgotten machinery. In the center stood a towering metal door, ancient yet humming with energy. Elyra skidded to a stop. "Help me open it." Darian slammed into the control panel, fingers flying over the cracked screen. "I don't even know what the hell I'm doing." Behind them, the creatures poured into the chamber, their bodies shifting, growing. They were mutating, adapting to the new environment. One of them reared back and let out a deafening howl. Elyra pressed her palm against a scanner. The door shuddered. Almost there. Darian kept firing, keeping the creatures at bay. But they were closing in. The ground shook violently. The ancient vault groaned as something deep beneath it began to stir. The door split open. A gust of stale air rushed out. Elyra grabbed Darian's wrist and yanked him inside just as the first creature lunged. The door slammed shut behind them. Silence. Darian staggered, chest heaving. What the hell was that? Elyra didn't answer. She was staring straight ahead, her entire body rigid. Darian followed her gaze. The room before them was vast, lined with metal walls pulsing with veins of blue light. And in the center, suspended in a massive containment field, was something that should not exist. A weapon. Or maybe something worse. Darian took a cautious step forward. "Elyra, what is that?" She swallowed hard. "The reason they left me behind." Behind them, the vault trembled again. The monsters weren't giving up, and Darian had the sinking feeling that they had just traded one nightmare for another. Darian's pulse pounded in his ears as he stared at the massive containment field in front of him. Suspended inside was something ancient, powerful, and undeniably wrong. It was a sphere, swirling with dark energy, shifting and pulsing like a living thing. Strange symbols flickered across its surface, glowing for a moment before vanishing into the void. The air around it hummed, thick with pressure, making it hard to breathe. Darian clenched his fists. "What the hell is that?" Elyra didn't answer immediately. She stepped forward, her glowing blue eyes locked onto the sphere, her hands trembling. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "It's not just a weapon," she said. "It's a prison." Darian frowned. "A prison? For what?" Elyra turned to him, and in her gaze, he saw something that sent a cold shiver down his spine. Terror. Before she could answer, the ground trembled violently. A deep, guttural roar echoed from the other side of the vault door. The creatures were still trying to break through. Darian took a step back. "I don't think we have time for explanations. We need to get out of here." Elyra's expression darkened. "No. If we leave it here, they'll use it." Darian narrowed his eyes. "They? You mean your people?" She nodded. "They abandoned this place for a reason. But if they've come back, it means they want the sphere." Her voice tightened. "We can't let them have it." Darian exhaled sharply. "All right, fine. Then what's the plan?" "Because I don't think that thing has an off switch." Elyra hesitated. Then, slowly, she raised her hand toward the sphere. As if in response, the dark energy pulsed, reaching out toward her, tendrils of shadow curling through the air. The symbols on the sphere flashed violently, and the vault shook again. Darian instinctively grabbed her wrist. "Elyra, wait. You don't even know what it will do." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Yes, I do." Her voice was steady, but there was something in it. A weight. a certainty that made his stomach twist. Before he could stop her, she placed her palm against the containment field. The effect was immediate. A shockwave exploded outward, sending Darian stumbling backward. The chamber was filled with an ear-piercing hum, and the shadows inside the sphere moved. And then, a voice, low, ancient, crawling into Darian's mind like 1,000 whispers speaking at once. "You are not ready." Darian's breath caught. The room darkened. The sphere pulsed again. And suddenly, the door behind them buckled. The creatures outside let out a blood-curdling screech as the metal warped and cracked. They were almost through. Darian turned to Elyra. "Whatever you're doing, do it fast." But Elyra wasn't listening. She was frozen, her entire body shuddering as the sphere's energy coiled around her. Then, the containment field shattered. A deafening roar filled the chamber as the shadows inside were released. The darkness spread like liquid, seeping into the walls, the floors, the air itself. The monsters outside screeched in terror. And then, they stopped. Silence. Darian's heart pounded. "Elyra?" She turned to him, slowly. Her silver hair floated weightlessly around her face, her blue skin now laced with flickering symbols, the same ones that had been on the sphere. Her eyes. They were no longer just Elyra's. They were something else. Something ancient. Something powerful. Darian swallowed hard. "What did you just do?" Elyra tilted her head, and when she spoke, her voice was layered, as if something else was speaking through her. "I woke up." The vault trembled. The air thickened, and Darian knew nothing would ever be the same again. Darian's instinct screamed at him to move, to raise his weapon, to do something. But he couldn't. Not yet. Elyra, if she was even still Elyra, stood before him, her body wreathed in dark energy. The swirling shadows from the sphere had fused with her, pulsing through her veins like liquid stardust. The ancient symbols flickering across her skin weren't just on her. They were a part of her now. And her eyes, deep, endless, not just glowing, but radiating, like twin stars burning with knowledge and power far beyond anything he could comprehend. Darian tightened his grip on his rifle. "Elyra?" She looked at him, her head tilting slightly, almost as if she were seeing him for the first time. Then she smiled. "You're afraid." Darian stiffened. Her voice wasn't just hers anymore. It carried layers, like multiple voices speaking at once, some familiar, others alien, ancient, filled with forgotten echoes of things that should have never existed. "What the hell happened to you?" he demanded. Elyra blinked slowly, as if processing his words. "I remember now." Darian took a cautious step back. "Remember what?" She raised her hand, and the shadows coiling around her fingers rippled in response. "Who I was." Her voice dipped lower, almost reverent. "Who I am." The vault trembled violently. The air itself shifted, growing dense, charged with raw energy. Darian forced himself to stay calm. "Elyra, you're scaring the hell out of me." She took a step forward. "You shouldn't be afraid, Darian." Behind them, the vault door finally gave in. A deafening screech filled the chamber as the creatures, hundreds of them, spilled inside. But something was wrong. They weren't charging. They weren't attacking. They were kneeling. Darian's pulse thundered. He watched in disbelief as the grotesque beasts, some of the most nightmarish things he had ever seen, lowered themselves to the ground, bowing their twisted heads before Elyra, worshipping her. He looked back at her, his stomach knotting. "What are you?" Elyra slowly lifted her hand, fingers splayed. The symbols on her body blazed brighter. The kneeling creatures shuddered, their bodies vibrating unnaturally. And then, they vanished. Not killed, not destroyed, simply erased. Gone. Darian's breath caught in his throat. Elyra lowered her hand, exhaling softly, as if she had just done something as effortless as blinking. "I was made here," she murmured, half to herself. "But I did not begin here." Darian took another step back. "I need answers. Now." Elyra's gaze snapped back to his. For a moment, she looked like the girl he had found chained in the facility. Small, vulnerable, lost. But then, "I was not supposed to wake up," she said. "Not yet." A cold weight settled in Darian's chest. "Why?" Elyra's expression darkened. Because they feared me. The vault trembled again. The air pulsed with something unseen, something ancient. Darian forced himself to stay steady. Who are you? She exhaled, her fingers curling slightly, as if grasping at something unseen. Then, in that same layered, haunting voice, she whispered, I am the first. Darian's blood ran cold. Before he could speak, the chamber shook violently. A deep, distant roar rumbled through the walls, something far bigger than anything they had encountered before. Elyra turned sharply. They're coming. Darian frowned. Who? She looked back at him, and her next words sent ice down his spine. The ones who put me to sleep. Darian's breath was shallow. The weight of Elyra's words pressed against him like a crushing force. The ones who put me to sleep. That meant something, was coming. And if they were powerful enough to lock Elyra away, he didn't want to find out what they could do now that she was awake. The chamber trembled again, but this time, it wasn't from the monsters or the shifting vault. It was from outside. A deep hum resonated through the walls, mechanical and vast. Darian recognized the sound instantly. Starships. More than one. They found us, he muttered. Glancing up, Elyra's glowing gaze flicked toward the ceiling, as if she could see through the rock and metal. No, she corrected, voice eerily calm. They were never looking for us. They were looking for me. Darian exhaled sharply, gripping his rifle. Then we need to move. Fast. Elyra didn't move. Darian grabbed her wrist. Elyra, now. The moment his fingers touched her, a shockwave erupted outward. His vision blurred. The world tilted. And suddenly, he was somewhere else. It wasn't the vault. It wasn't the planet. It wasn't anywhere he had ever been before. Darian stood in an endless void, surrounded by swirling stars and shifting shadows. And before him, a figure, towering, unfathomable. Its form was indistinct, like a living nebula wrapped in darkness. But its eyes, twin voids of pure, bottomless black, locked onto him with terrifying awareness. You do not belong here. Darian staggered, struggling to breathe. Where the hell is here? The figure did not move, yet its presence pressed against him like an ocean of gravity. You stand at the precipice of forgotten time. You were brought here, because she remembers. She? Elyra's voice came from behind him. They don't want me to wake up, Darian. He turned. She was standing there, her silver hair floating weightlessly, her glowing body a stark contrast to the void around them. Darian's heart pounded. Elyra, what the hell is going on? The massive figure loomed closer. She was locked away for a reason. Elyra didn't flinch. Because you were afraid. Silence. Then, yes. Darian tensed. That was not the answer he had expected. Elyra stepped forward. You made me. And when you realized what I was, you tried to erase me. The figure rumbled. We tried to contain you. There is a difference. Elyra's hands clenched into fists. Then why did you fail? The entity hesitated. And for the first time, Darian saw something in its vast, cosmic form. Not power, not dominance, but fear. Because you are not a weapon, it admitted. You are something far worse. The void shuddered, and suddenly, Darian was back. He gasped, staggering as reality snapped into place. The vault, the distant roar of incoming ships, the pulsing energy surrounding Elyra. She stood before him, her eyes locking onto his. They're coming, she said again. And this time, they won't leave without me. Darian exhaled. Then what do we do? Elyra tilted her head. You still have a choice, Darian. Leave now, and they won't care about you. Stay, and you'll be standing against something far greater than you can imagine. Darian looked at her for a long moment. Then, without hesitation, he raised his rifle. I didn't drag you out of that lab just to abandon you now, he said. So if I'm going to die today, I'd rather do it on my feet. Elyra blinked. Then, she smiled. The vault shook as the ships descended. The battle was coming, and Darian had made his choice.